This episode is all about going from anxiety and avoidance to confidence and connection. I don't know why, but I was on my way to a networking thing last week and suddenly I remembered a moment from 5.5 years ago. And it was one that I hadn't really thought about since then. I was still working in Toronto. It was an after work networking event and I had every intention of going. I got dressed, I got myself there, and then I stood outside of the venue and I completely froze. I could see through the windows all my colleagues and acquaintances and friends. I could hear the noise of conversation and clinking glasses, but my whole body was absolutely shut down. My breathing was shallow, my heart was pounding, and I physically could not walk myself through that door. And instead of going in, I turned and I walked up the street. I found another bar, and then I texted my good buddy Tim and said, I just can't do it. I can't go in. I'm not going. He asked where I was, and he came to meet me. And so I sat at the bar that night, long after he left, drinking, and I was kind of thinking that I had quelled my anxiety. But really, I had just numbed it, and it had made everything worse later. And now, going to networking events, I feel zero anxiety. There's no panic, there's no dread, there's just excitement. I am a completely different woman than the shell of a human who stood outside that bar 5.5 years ago. So what's changed? Why was I so anxious then, but now I can walk into literally any room, any situation where I don't know anybody and feel completely at home? And I want to talk about that today because things can change if you choose to change them. So there's mental gymnastics that are keeping us stuck. Back then, I was exhausted all the time. I was overworking, overdrinking, numbing myself with antidepressants and anti-anxiety medication that obviously wasn't working. And at the core of it all, I felt like a fraud. So imposter syndrome, like that belief that you're not capable, you're not skilled or deserving as other people think you are, it was first studied in the 70s. And now the research shows that high achievers especially, or perfectionists, and the people who are stepping outside their comfort zone tend to feel it the most. And it makes sense. Our brains are literally wired for survival. So when we enter a situation where we feel exposed, where we might fail or be judged, our fear center kicks in. And then the thoughts start circling the drain. I don't belong here. What if they realize I don't actually know what I'm doing? I'm going to embarrass myself. And so we tend to avoid. We'll stay small, we numb out. Does this sound familiar? That was me. And I was living in that feeling of overwhelm constantly. I was trying so hard to keep everything together, but constantly feeling like I'm failing. There was this doubt that always seemed to whisper, who do you think you are? And then there was a fear of being seen, of showing up, of speaking up, of taking up space. And that turned into a reluctance to take care of myself because I felt like I should be able to just push through. And then I was avoiding, whether it was through drinking or scrolling or staying busy or numbing out, because facing what's really going on sometimes feels way too big to deal with. I get it. I lived in that for a long time. The thing is, though, is we don't feel like a fraud because we're unqualified. We end up feeling like a fraud because our brain is trying to protect us from the risk that we might encounter. So then what actually shifted? The first thing is I stopped using quick fixes and faced what I was avoiding. The drinking didn't help. The overworking didn't help. Avoiding everything didn't help either. It took time, but I started noticing that the things I thought were helping were actually keeping me stuck. And if you're honest with yourself, and I'm sure you have some go-to avoidance strategies at work, but just ask yourself a question. What are you using to distract yourself from what actually needs your attention? The second thing is I did the inner work, even when it was really, really uncomfortable. Because the truth is growth doesn't feel good at first. Sometimes it just plain old sucks. Sitting with discomfort instead of running from it was one of the hardest things I had to learn how to do. There's neuroscience that tells us that when we stop the cycle of avoidance and actually let ourselves feel discomfort, we start to rewire our brain to handle the stress better. Breath work, mindfulness, self-reflection, actually being present in my own body instead of trying to escape it. All of those help to break me out of that cycle. And the third thing, I built a solid foundation of self-trust and self-compassion. The biggest shift is stop looking for validation outside of myself. I stopped trying to prove my worth. I stopped trying to wait for permission to do something. Instead, I started asking, do I trust myself? Do I like who I am? Am I living in alignment with my values? And that literally changed everything. Who I am versus who I was then is two different people. Then I was overworked, overdrinking, numbing. I was running on empty, doubting every decision and feeling like I didn't belong anywhere. I was avoiding the hard things and choosing the easy way out every time. Versus now, I trust myself fully and completely. I make decisions from a place of clarity and not fear. I'm comfortable in my own skin, finally. I'm confident in my work, my impact, my worth. And I'm no longer afraid to walk into any room. Now, if you're sitting here listening to this and thinking, I want that, but I don't even know where to start, let's break it down. Number one, I want you to call it the avoidance. Where in your life are you not showing up fully because of fear? 2, I want you to interrupt the cycle. The next time you feel the doubt creeping in, because I'm sure that you're aware of it, I want you to take a pause. I want you to take a breath and remind yourself, this is just my brain trying to keep me safe. And ask, what would be the 1% step to get out of this doubt? 3, take one small step towards showing up as her. Ask yourself, what would be the most confident version of me to do right now? And then go do that. Because what happens when you reconcile who you are, you end up showing up in every single area of your life with much more confidence and a lot easier. If this resonated with you, I'd love for you to comment, to like, share, subscribe, and I'd also love for you to message me on Instagram or in the comments and tell me what's one area where you are working on showing up more fully. And if you want to go deeper, join me for a free perspective sessions. Those happen monthly, because getting out of your head and into your body, that is where the magic happens. Thank you so much for being here. Until next time, breathe it in, be deliberate, and please be good to yourself.